What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Big Ten Football Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Guggenheim, and I've got a special guest here today. JR is here from the Big Ten Huddle. We are so excited to talk about Rivalry Week, and we got a great show for you here. Again, if you are looking for this podcast, you can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. This one is on YouTube, so make sure you like and you smash that subscribe button, leave a comment, leave reviews. And you can always find us on Instagram, on Twitter, email us at big10footballtalk@gmail.com. JR, welcome to the show. Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm JR. I run a podcast called The Big Ten Huddle. You can find us on YouTube, Twitter, all those different places. I'm with a company called Big Banter Sports, and we talk Big Ten all the time. So we have like a podcast for every Big Ten team, and then we have my podcast where I invite on people from Big Banter, and I've also had Zach on a time, and I bring other people on different times. And right now it's a lot of recaps and previews and stuff like that. But we also just talk about the news of the Big Ten. We've talked about Jim Harbaugh a lot, probably more than I've ever wanted to, but it's just kind of the way things are. We've been talking about Coach of the Year, and I know we'll get into that a little bit later. Anything Big Ten we can pretty much talk about. We try to talk about and hit on.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And if we want to find your podcast and we want to find where can we follow you and where can we get the podcast?
Yeah, so best place to follow me, place I'm most active is on Twitter, the Big Ten Huddle, all together. And then you can search the Big Ten Huddle on any podcasting platform, Apple, Spotify, Podbean, all of those things. You'll find us there. Just type in the Big Ten Huddle.
And you also have a personal page too, JR's rankings.
Yeah, JR_rankings. That's like all Ohio State and really Homer stuff. So you probably are not going to like it unless you're an Ohio State fan.
That's, as people are coming in for this podcast, you need to understand that both of us are Ohio State fans. And this is the one episode of every year that I feel the prerogative to be a little bit more homerish because It is the Ohio State game versus the team up north. And so to my friend Yankee Wolverine, who follows us and is an ardent listener and supporter of the show, appreciate you. But today I'm going to be much more homerific. Although my pick may not be as homerific as my banter. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah. Before we get to picks, and we get to, we will actually talk a little bit about Harbaugh and Signgate and the impact of that on the game, because I think it does have an impact on the game. I do want to get to the coach of the year stuff because I got a comment. I love interaction with people who listen. I'm sure you do too, JR. Oh, yeah. But I had someone send in a comment about Coach of the Year. I have been very, very an avid fan of Greg Schiano and David Braun, and I've said multiple times over the past several weeks that I feel like they should be Coach of the Year. Well, Nick R. Bush wrote in, and I appreciate his willingness to say what he wanted to say, but he basically was saying, you've got to be joking that it's Braun and Schiano. Look at what Kirk Ferentz has done. Look at what he's done at Iowa. He's 9-2. He's won the West. How is he not the obvious choice for Coach of the Year? So in response to that, I put up a poll. I put 4 coaches on it. I put Schiano, Braun, Ferentz, and Ryan Day. I think it was a straight tie for first with Schiano and Braun. Ryan Day was a distant third, and coming in at fourth, but very close to Ryan Day was Ferentz. And so whenever someone writes in, I have my opinions obviously, but I do want to consider what different fans are saying. And so JR, I'd love to hear, since you're locked into the Big Ten too, what are your thoughts on Kirk Ferentz, on Iowa's season? Like, should we give more consideration to Kirk Ferentz as Coach of the Year in the Big Ten?
Yeah, so I put out Coach of the Year power rankings it's not so much my thoughts on who is the Coach of the Year. It's more like me trying to predict the award. But also my thoughts get into it and my bias and stuff like that as well. So it's hard to completely eliminate that. However, right now my top four are David Braun, Kirk Ferentz, Greg Schiano, and then fourth is Ryan Day. And what I've found as I watch Iowa and as I kind of pick apart their situation more and more, Kirk Ferentz has done a fantastic job this season. I don't think there's any question that what he's been able to do is to be nearly a top 15 team. They'll be top 20, I think, at the end of the year as long as they win their bowl game. But to have your son forcibly fired by the administration, to lose your starting quarterback, both your starting tight ends, which the tight end position is the bedrock of that Iowa offense. I know, national media guys like to make jokes about the Iowa offense, Big Ten fans too, don't get me wrong. But when you look at it schematically, there's a reason why that offense plays the way they do. If you just look at the numbers, it's like, oh, ha, ha, they're number 130. But if you actually watch the Iowa games, there's a reason why that offense is as conservative as it is and does what they do. Now, a big part of that is they just don't have talent, right? I mean, they don't have the offensive talent. They don't have the skill position guys that they need to have. Their linemen are okay, but they're nothing, none of them are probably going to be All-Americans or anything like that. But I look at what Kirk Ferentz has done and say, I look at the injuries, I look at the firing of his son, and not only did he win the Big Ten West, I mean, he won it pretty convincingly. There was a point there where like 5 other teams could possibly win the Big Ten West. But I think when we looked at that, we all knew that, all Iowa had to do was win one more game and they were going to win the West. So, so I do sympathize with Iowa fans because I don't think Kirk Ferentz gets the credit he deserves. But I would also say, remember what everybody was saying about Northwestern at the beginning of the season. I mean, there were people saying they're not going to win any other game but Howard. I mean, there were people saying that, like, oh, yeah, they might beat UNLV. We'll see. And now he's bowl eligible. Like, the dude took over I mean, let's not forget, just like, I think it was last year or the year before, the dude was in FCS.
Yep.
And now he's at Northwestern. He's the interim head coach. He got the team bowl eligible. Now he's the head coach of a Big Ten program making far more money than he would have ever made in FCS. Now, I get it. It's not the best Big Ten program out there, but this is still a Big Ten program that has competed for the West and won the West a couple times here lately. So, if it wasn't for David Braun's, heroism, it would probably be between Greg Schiano and Kirk Ferentz for me. But I just think you have to look at David Braun and say, what he's done this season with the expectations they had, he's just far exceeded them.
Well, the expectations, but also he's following Pat Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
And he's cleaning up an absurd mess.
Yes.
And both of those, I mean, you could have easily lost the program. Mm-hmm. And I think not only, like, I totally agree with you. I think I had them 1-11 going like for this season.
I had them 2-10.
Yeah. And like, I wasn't convinced that they would beat Howard. Right. And
they almost did it. That's a crazy
right.
thing.
Right. But I think what we always have to remember, Coach of the Year is it's a contextual award.
Yeah.
Like, otherwise the Big Ten champion would always get it. And we know from history, like, Ryan Day was the first Ohio State coach to win Coach of the Year, like, I think since John Cooper.
Yeah.
Like, which is absurd, by the way. Mm-hmm. But, and so the context, like, you have to remember Kirk Ferentz, and I think Kirk Ferentz will go down as maybe the best Iowa head coach.
Oh, I think so.
Like, Hayden Fry, maybe, but, like, he has done such an amazing job there. Mm-hmm. But you have to remember too, look at who he's done it against. Like, he didn't have to go against Ohio State or Michigan. If you look at the coaches, you have 4 first-time head coaches in the Big Ten West. And then you have Brett Bielema, who lost a ton of talent at Illinois, and PJ Fleck, who quite honestly is just PJ Fleck. And you lost to him, which I know is controversial. But I like we're talking about, you know, if you're trying to compare like who are the top 2 or 3 coaches for this, like you've got to split hairs. And I think that's what we're doing when we're saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't have kept your son on. I know that was a tough thing. And maybe you should have had more offensive development. I don't think that takes anything away from what Kirk Ferentz has accomplished and getting to the Big Ten West. And I would not be surprised if Iowa gives whoever wins the East a game, because for several reasons, one being that defense. But I just think you got to look at David Braun's situation and be like, oh my gosh, like what he went through. Like he thought he was going to be offensive coordinator in July.
Right.
And now he's, you know, the head coach of a team that went 1-11 last year. So yeah, I appreciate your take, because I think you're helping me, and I think helping the listeners understand. Like Kirk has probably been slandered, probably by me as well, more than he should be, and he has certainly been one of the top coaches in the league this year. But I think you've got to give David Braun and I think Schiano real props for what they have done as well, and they have exceeded expectations as much, if not more so, than Kirk has at Iowa. So
yeah, a couple weeks ago I put out a question on Twitter, and it wasn't a poll. It was just kind of like an open-ended question, and I said, you know, say David Braun gets bowl eligible, Kirk Ferentz wins out, you know, finishes with 2 losses, and Greg Schiano beats either Penn State or Ohio State, you know, to end the year. Which one of those is your Big Ten Coach of the Year? Mm-hmm. And it was still unanimous David Braun, because everybody was saying this guy got bowl eligible. Like, yeah. do we understand who Northwestern? And so it's like, even if Greg Schiano and Kirk Ferentz is about to do it. I mean, if he wins this weekend against Nebraska, he is going to win out and only have 2 losses. Even in that scenario, what David Braun has done, just it deserves the recognition for him to be able to have done what he's done.
Agreed. So we are renaming the podcast David Braun Support Podcast, and we're gonna move on.
I've had people say we're the Rutgers Huddle, so
I'm all for the programs that don't have as much, that don't get as much support, because and I think Rutgers and Northwestern both having great seasons, and so and that's not to take away from Iowa. So this is a fun week, and so we're gonna get to picks right now. We're going to do 6 of the 7, and then we're going to spend a chunk of time on the game, as I think we should, even if we weren't 2 Ohio State homers, right? It's 2 versus 3, the implications, the scandal, all that stuff. But I think something that's interesting, I'll just note this, and then we'll kind of get right into it. Only one game this weekend has a spread bigger than, I think, 6 points.
Yeah, you're right.
And that's Penn State, Michigan State.
Yep.
Because part of that is because I'm not sure Michigan State has enough scholarship players to field that are healthy.
Those availability reports came at just the right time, because you look at it like everybody else's and it's like, oh, it's this small, and then you look at Michigan State.
It's a scroll. Like you're just unraveling it, right?
They printed out 2 pages instead of 1.
Oh, it's gonna be rough. So we're gonna stick with Iowa. We're just gonna go with how these games are going to fall on the weekend, except for the game.
Yep.
Number 17, Iowa, the college football playoff rankings just came out as we're recording this. Iowa down to 17 this week. They are at Nebraska. The game is on CBS. It's a 12 p.m. kick, and Nebraska, believe it or not, is a 2.5-point favorite. Quarterback situation for Nebraska still, I'd say iffy. It's been iffy all season.
Yeah.
Not sure if Harburg's going to go or if it's going to be Purdy. Who you got in this one?
Well, for basically the entire season, I've been telling Nebraska fans, if you guys can just put together a game where you have reliable quarterback play, you'll win. And then they played Wisconsin, and they had reliable quarterback play, and they lost. So to me, it's like, unfortunately, I think Nebraska is just in the spot right now where, yes, I think they're a good team, and I think Matt Rule is a really good coach. I think that Iowa's just going to be too much for them. I think it's going to be a close game because every game Iowa plays is a close game, except for Rutgers a couple weeks ago. But I think that Nebraska's found their quarterback, and that's very good. But I think a win here would do wonders for them. To have the extra practice time that you need to like go into a bowl, that would help a lot. I think that Matt Rule just like doing everything he can with his culture would help a lot. But it just seems like Nebraska is one of those teams that something will go wrong for them. Whether it's a pick at the end of the game, whether it's bad tackling, whether it's, a big play or something like that. I feel like after last year when Nebraska kind of, they beat Iowa at the end of the year and made that hard on them, I feel like Iowa's going to come in and they're going to play inspired. They're going to play wanting to win and show people, that they are a good football team. Believe it or not, I think Iowa's offense is playing its best football it's played all season long right now. 2 weeks ago they had over 400 yards. Last week they scored 15 points, which I know like that sounds like wow, real barn burner, but that's a good week for Iowa. So I know Cooper DeJean being lost is a little questionable, but I have Iowa 10-7 in this one.
So you're going under.
Yeah, I always go under with Iowa.
That's a safe bet. This was hard because I think I picked against Iowa 3 out of the last 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. I didn't do a picks pod last week, and I'm pretty sure in my mind I picked against Iowa. So I have not been on the Iowa train, and part of the reason why is because when you don't have an offense, you lose your margin for error. Mm-hmm. I think the problem is like Nebraska doesn't like I think they are getting a little bit more sound, but they just don't have a lot of weapons to really.
They have a lot of injuries too.
Yeah, they're very injured.
Yeah.
I think Matt Rule will have these boys ready to go, but I actually agree with you. I think oddly enough, Iowa with all the injuries that they have, I think they've really started to put together some good games offensively. I also am going Iowa, which I think it's funny. As I was coming to the podcast, I was like, I think I'll pick Nebraska, but I actually think Iowa. I think they're going to clamp down on Nebraska. I think they're going to turn them over. I've got 13-7, so a little bit more. It's still under, but I've got
I think it's like the lowest over under ever, and we're still going under.
Yeah, it's.
What is it, 26.5, I think is the over-under or something like that.
Is it 26? I thought, let me check real quick.
Last I checked, I think it was somewhere around 26.
27.5.
27, okay.
At least, it dropped down to 26.5. It went down. It opened at 27.5. Oh my gosh. Oh man.
I love it. I love Iowa football. I love watching it. It's just awesome.
It's old school. It's old school Big Ten, 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Yeah.
So, or rubber pellets.
Right.
So, number 11, Penn State at Ford Field taking on Michigan State. Pseudo home game for the Spartans, where Penn State fans actually might fill more of the stadium. But Penn State is a 21-point favorite. This is 7:30 p.m. These are both, by the way, on Black Friday, not on Saturday. So 7:30 p.m. game. Penn State's a 21-point favorite. Who you got on in this one?
I just don't think I can pick Michigan State. There's too many guys out right now. I don't like Harlan Barnett. I know he's talking about interviewing for the job and everything. I think Michigan State would be just absolutely wild to hire him. I don't think that he's done a good job. I don't think that he has good coordinators. I know he bleeds green, and that's awesome for him. But unfortunately, I just don't think he's made to be a head coach of a Big Ten program. As somebody who roots for the Big Ten, I hope they do not. I would rather them hire Jimbo Fisher as the coach over at Michigan State. So, and I know Penn State's had their struggles with their offense, but I just think that Michigan State is so depleted that Penn State will, they have stars. I mean, even though Drew Aller's not been the best, he's still a 5-star quarterback. They still have Nick Singleton. That offensive line, I know there's a couple spots where it's kind of iffy here and there, but they're still a better team than Michigan State. I have them winning 41-6.
Yeah, I think Franklin said Aller got dinged in the Rutgers game. He said he's going to play. Yeah. And I think he also said that Bo Prabula, who's the backup, who's more of a run threat, is also going to play in this game.
And I actually like the offense better with Bo in there than last week.
It kind of turns back into that Trace McSorley style
which I think
offense.
Is more fitting for Penn State.
And I think it's more fitting for Franklin. Yeah. Like, I don't think Franklin knows how to use a pro style quarterback.
Yeah.
And I think when he had Hackenberg, he didn't know what to do with him. And I think Hackenberg didn't like being there once Bill O'Brien had moved on. And and they don't have the receivers right now. Yeah. Like, Keandre Lambert-Smith is a good weapon.
He'd be a good 2 or 3 on most other teams, but he's just not a 1.
Yeah. But that being said, I agree. It's amazing that they've won 2 out of the last that Michigan State has won 2 out of the last 3.
Yeah.
But I agree. Like, Michigan State is a top 25 caliber program. And I actually think the expansion of the conference is going to help them because they get out of the death division. Mm-hmm. And so you get the right coach. And even if Harlan Barnett impressed at all in the last 3 weeks, which I don't think it should. It's Indiana and I forget who else did
Nebraska.
Nebraska, that's right.
Yeah.
It's Indiana and Nebraska. Like, you're getting killed by everybody with a pulse. So but I agree with you. I think they're too depleted. I think Penn State covers. I've got 35-10. And I'm not sure it's even that close. I think Penn State might struggle the offensive woes might come to bear a little bit, but not enough to make this close.
You might see something similar to like what we saw with Minnesota and Ohio State last week, 13-0 at halftime, but there was no doubt that Ohio State was still winning that game,
Right.
That's probably what you'll see, something like that here with Penn State and Michigan State.
Yeah. Enough for Penn State fans to feel icky.
Yeah.
At some point.
to get mad again.
Yeah. Which I get. So, Old Oaken Bucket game. This is on Saturday. It's noon kick. Big Ten Network. Purdue is a 3-point favorite in this game. Both teams are 3-8. Ryan Walters trying to get his first taste of rivalry victory. Tom Allen may be coaching for his job. Maybe, maybe I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I think even if he wins, you still fire him. I mean, this is just I like Tom Allen. I root for IU in addition to my Buckeyes because I just my in-laws all like IU, and I really don't have any reason to dislike them. So they're probably like my second Big Ten team, kind of. Which is a little depressing, but it is what it is. If I get disgusted by them, I just go watch Ohio State, and then I feel better. But no, I think Tom Allen. It's clear that he's not the coach to lead Indiana to where they need to go. I don't think he's a bad coach. I think he'll be a good defensive coordinator somewhere, and eventually, if he makes it back to the Big Ten as a defensive coordinator, I think that he would do really well in that area. But I don't think that he's Big Ten head coach material. He might do really well with a group of 5 team or something like that. But the school just isn't right for him. The position isn't right for him. But with all that said, I still think Indiana has a good chance to win this weekend. So I am going to pick Indiana to win 27-24 because I do think that Tom Allen can get those guys inspired to play well. They've not played terribly the past few weeks. But I do have a source, somebody who is like an assistant athletic director at a Big Ten school, and she told me that Indiana is scraping the money together, and they're probably going to fire Tom Allen, and just they're kind of letting him finish the season out of respect, because everybody there does like him.
Yeah.
They have to move on from him, especially in this new Big Ten that's coming in.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I think since the beginning of the season, the writing kind of felt like it was on the wall. Although I agree, I don't know Hudson Card's status on this game. He was out last week for Purdue. And I agree. I think Indiana wins this game. I'm going to go 20-17.
Yeah.
Indiana wins. We'll keep moving. Northwestern at Illinois. Illinois is a 5.5-point favorite. Illinois needs to win to get bowl eligible. What are your thoughts?
I think they're going to do it. I think Illinois is going to win this one 28-17. I really like John Paddock. I think he's playing well. I don't think that Johnny Newton wants to be done, without a final win or something like that, especially on senior night for the Illini. So I think him and Keith Randolph are going to play very inspired football. I know he's not going to play in the bowl game. That was announced earlier today. But I still think he wants to give his all for his team and play hard. And I like Isaiah Williams. I think Isaiah Williams is a really underrated wide receiver in the Big Ten. And so him and John Paddock seem to have a connection. So in this one, I'm glad Northwestern's gotten bowl eligible, but I think it's time that Illinois plays the inspired football to become bowl eligible, and Northwestern will probably finish 6-6.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think as Ben Bryant came back for Northwestern, and he has played really well, and Cam Porter's starting to run really well. Northwestern's playing so much better than they should, which gives me pause in this game because I'm like, at least for probably the last 5-6 weeks, I'm like, I felt like the score against Maryland was a bit shocking. It didn't tell the whole story. Like I thought they dominated Maryland.
Yeah.
And it's just, I'm like, how much of that is real?
Right.
Because I know from a recruiting standpoint and the overall roster, I'm like, Northwestern they're not good. But the way they're playing right now, I'm like, man, I agree with everything that you just said. And yet there's a part of me that's like, but I kind of think Northwestern's playing better right now.
It's all about who's going to be more inspired.
Yeah. If they were playing against Minnesota and PJ Fleck, I'd pick Northwestern.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing Brett Bielema, who I have a lot of respect for. And I think he's going to get it done. Paddock has been very good in relief of Altmaier.
Yeah.
He's been
he's been better than Altmaier.
Yeah, he's been great. Isaiah Williams, I think, is an underrated weapon in the Big Ten, and I think those defensive tackles are maybe the best outside of Michigan and Ohio State. So I agree. I think Newton and
Keith Randolph.
I keep wanting to say Keith Richards. That's definitely not it. Reynolds, yeah. I think they wrecked the game. I've got 24-17 Illinois over Northwestern.
About the same, yeah.
The Axe, Wisconsin at 6-5 against Minnesota. This is on FS1, 3:30 kick. Wisconsin's a 2.5-point favorite. Who you got?
Yeah, I think that Wisconsin in this one it's very helpful that they're starting to get their players back. They are going to probably be, I don't know. I can't remember. I was looking it up earlier, but Hunter Wohler, he was hurt in the game, so I don't remember if he's coming back for this one or not. But Tanner Mordecai did start playing. Braylon Allen went to that game, even though Luke Fickell said he wouldn't. He still was playing in that game. I think that Wisconsin is playing for a lot of pride right now, and I think they really want to put it all together. And I know people are down on Luke Fickell for what he's done to start the season, but you can tell Wisconsin's still playing inspired football. and they're still playing hard. And every time those guys talk about their coach, they're talking very highly of him. I think Minnesota has the injury bug here to end the season, so unfortunately, I don't think the Gophers are going to go bowling. I think Wisconsin's going to win this one, 21-17.
Yeah, I think Luke. It's Luke Fickell. I thought he would do better this year, but I
did
think
too. I had him win in the West.
Yeah, I did as well, and I think it just goes to show it takes time, at least a year most of the time, to really reset a culture. And you forget, like, they're trying to do an air raid mixed with power run, but their receiving core is nowhere near where it needs to be.
Yeah.
And the offensive line still has to get better.
And the blocking on the outside for that receiving core isn't great
either. Yeah, that's a really good point. And
Yeah.
so having said all that, Minnesota is depleted in the one spot you don't want them to be depleted against Wisconsin, and that is the linebacking core.
Mm-hmm.
And Braylon Allen, he was not healthy last week, but he played. I think he'll probably be a little healthier this week. I think Braylon Allen runs at least for 100. I've got it, not a close game. I've got 27-10, Wisconsin over Minnesota. I just think Minnesota's too beat up, and I think you're right that they're playing inspired football for Fick right now. So
Yep.
I think also the overtime win really galvanizes them.
Yeah.
This game is probably the one I'm most looking forward to outside of the one in Ann Arbor. Maryland at Rutgers, 3:30, Big Ten Network. Maryland a 1-point favorite. Both teams 6-5. Who you got?
This is a really tough one to pick. I picked my score to be 24-20, and honestly, I could see it being either team. I feel like Maryland and Rutgers are both teams that Maryland can kind of show up whenever and play a good game, like they did against Michigan last week. I knew they were kind of like a sleeper team that could give Michigan a battle. They gave them a better battle than I thought they would. I thought it would kind of be like Ohio State last year, maybe, where it's like close game going into the fourth, and then Ohio State pulled ahead, and I thought Michigan might do the same thing, but Michigan never did. They got that safety to kind of ice the game, and that helped them. And Rutgers, they're kind of going through a rough stretch right now, but I think they had a game last week that was, I wouldn't say easy, but it was a little bit less than the Iowa and the Ohio State stuff like that that they have been having. So I think they're going to be a little bit more rested going into this one. I think Greg Schiano feels that this is a really good season. I think he's going to get this running game going. I think he's going to continue to work with Gavin Wimsatt, make him a better passer, and I think he's going to let Gavin Wimsatt use his legs more in this one, because I don't know if the Maryland defense has the athleticism to run him down and take care of him. So yeah, I like I said, 24-20 is my score pick. I can see it going either way, but I'm going to go with Rutgers.
I think we might be aligned in every single pick. Rutgers has faced, I think, 3 top 5 defenses, if not top 5, top 10, all in a row. And I think the Iowa game was indicative of the fact that they had just played Ohio State and given Ohio State, a really tough game for 3 quarters. And they gave Penn State a tough game the week after. And I'm torn because Rutgers doesn't necessarily have the depth to kind of recover from a 3-game stretch. That's a brutal stretch.
Yeah.
And it was Ohio State at home and then Iowa and Penn State on the road.
Right.
But I also think they get up more for Greg Schiano in kind of the down games than Maryland. I think Maryland, when they feel deflated, you feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And that, every year when they lose their first game, it beats them another 2 times.
Yeah.
And this to me feels like a coaching game where it's like, I wouldn't say they're necessarily fully evenly matched talent-wise, but I do not trust Mike Locksley in a game like this.
Yeah.
And I think I think Maryland's defense is not at all the caliber of what Rutgers has faced. I think they'll be able to run the ball. I think Kyle Monangai, he'll get over 1,000 yards. I think it's the first time they'll have 1,000-yard back, I think, in 11 years. He's been phenomenal for them. I agree. I think getting Gavin Wibzat to use his athleticism. I like Rutgers in a low-scoring game. I've got 20-13. I think Tunga Bailoa throws a couple picks. And I just don't think they're gonna show up well in this game, which I know Maryland fans will not like, but I just think I trust Shiano more than Loxley in this type of a game.
I agree. I think that Shiano's the better coach. He's more inspiring to his team, and I think he's going to get it done. But I do want to give credit to Talia Tagovailoa because in these last two games, if he throws for over 515 yards, he will be the new career passing yards leader in the Big Ten. He'll get ahead of Curtis Painter.
How about that?
Yeah. So
good for Talia. I feel like we give Talia a lot. When he plays his game, he is very good.
Yeah. So as long as he gets over 250 yards in both games, he should get it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, and he'll have to throw in this game. I don't think they're going to be able to run well against this Rutgers defense.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a quick break, and then we will talk about Signgate and the game. Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify, and when you want to take conversations with your fans to the next level, Q&A and polls are the best way to get them talking. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions, and best of all, it's totally free. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started today. Well, welcome back to the Big Ten Football Talk podcast. We are talking the game, and from thenceforth, we will talk about that team up north as the team up north because this is my podcast, and we're two Ohio State homers. So
I wore the wrong apparel today. I have my Kent State hoodie on, and it kind of in the screen looks like a Michigan hoodie. So I'm in disguise, I guess, for this blue. One.
This is not.
We did not organize this well.
That's okay. Before we get into breaking down the game itself, JR, I'd love to hear your thoughts. We've talked about the scandal on our podcast. I know you guys have talked about it at the Big Ten Huddle.
Yeah.
How does this impact the game this week in your mind?
So I was kind of these past 4 games kind of studying Michigan a little bit more to kind of see like what different tendencies they have these 4 weeks than they did before them. Not necessarily to like catch something and say like, they're cheating, won them all these games. Not necessarily to do that, but because I am interested in, what does this team look like if they're possibly less confident, if they don't know the exact signs of what's going on, because that's a big thing too. If you know the other team's play, that can just give you confidence to do things. So it's possibly less about the cheating and more about just like the confidence in doing those things. But then also these past 2 weeks, I've been watching to see how are they different without Jim Harbaugh. It's amazing what Sherrone Moore has on his plate. Right? He's the offensive line coach, he's the offensive coordinator, and he's the head coach. I mean, those are all 3 pretty big jobs. And if you know anything about how college coaches work in practice time, the offensive line coach is not normally with the quarterbacks and stuff like that very often. I've said on the podcast before and in other places that I'm not a fan of offensive line coaches being the offensive coordinator. I've seen it at Ohio State. Brian Ferentz I think he was the offensive line coach, or he was a former offensive line coach as the offensive coordinator. Typically when you look at offensive coordinators who aren't doing a great job, they're not normally the offensive line coach. Now, I'm not saying that to say that Sherrone Moore is doing a bad job, but I am saying that, like, when you're the offensive line coach, there is an aspect of the passing game that you miss. And the passing game is far more complicated than the running game. That doesn't mean it's more important. That doesn't mean it's better or anything like that. It's just, more complicated and harder to grasp. And so I do think that this is a detriment on Sherrone Moore, and I don't think people are really taking into account how much of an impact this is that Jim Harbaugh's not there. I mean, Jim Harbaugh, to me, is the most important head coach on game day outside of some kind of play calling head coach in all of college football. Because of his staff, how young they are, how inexperienced they are as coordinators. Jesse Minter is the only coordinator on that staff who has been a coordinator somewhere else and was at Vanderbilt for 1 year. Sherrone Moore has never been a coordinator anywhere but Michigan. Steve Clinkscale has never been a coordinator anywhere but Michigan. Jay Harbaugh has never been a coordinator anywhere but Michigan. Jesse Minter's in his third year as a coordinator, his second one at Michigan. And so I look at it and I just think this is a tough situation for them. Now, Michigan can play very inspired football and they could get over it and still win. I'm not saying it's, over or anything like that. But I do think there's more there to it than what I've heard people talking about.
Yeah, it's helpful because I think you forget that Harbaugh not being there on game day. Like, granted, he's involved with all the game prep.
Yeah, he's still there during the week and at practice.
During the week. But it's a good reminder, like, on game day, like, where are people being focused and who is that steadying voice? And the reality is when you take Harbaugh off the sideline, Sherrone Moore is no longer just focusing on, like, the offensive line. And, he's got to manage everything. Right. And so everybody's got to now be delegated different jobs on top of what they already had responsibility wise.
Right.
And I think that's just a helpful reminder. Like this, I think it's easy. And I've even said this, like, in some ways I wish Harbaugh were on the sideline because.
Oh, definitely.
For one, if Ohio State wins this game, I want them to win with them being at full strength. No excuses.
Right.
But there's also, in my mind, I'm like, I don't want them to have any extra motivation. And I think in some ways we've seen at least the shirts like Free Harbaugh and Free, like they feel that.
Yeah.
But there is the reality that all these different jobs are now being thrust, like there's a ripple effect job wise. Right. And I think the other thing is, regardless of what the athletes say, like, oh, it's 100% Ohio State this week. It's 100% that, that can't be true.
Yeah.
Like, there is in the back of your mind all this stuff swirling, and as much as the Michigan beat writers and athletic director and all those people keep saying everything is fine, it's Ryan Day's fault, it's this, it's that, that there's still outside voices that are saying facts that even if the best players, like, how do you tune that out?
Yeah. I mean, I think that people don't realize how much the players do pay attention to the outside noise. One thing that happened to me today is I posted about a few different players. I posted about TreVeyon Henderson on my personal, like, Ohio State account. Posted about TreVeyon Henderson, Tommy Eichenberg, and Taven St. Clair. He's the Ohio State commit. That's class of 2025. And all three of those, I guess two of those three, like, within the first 5 minutes of me posting them, either a family member or the person that it was about themselves liked that tweet.
Wow.
And so, like, it's one of those things where, like, these people are on
Yeah, that's well said. That's well said. Well, with that being said, noon, Saturday, big noon kickoff, Fox. The line is dropped to 3 points. The team up north is the favorite, but that line is dropped. I think it was 4.5. It's now down to 3.
I think it was like 7 to begin the season.
Yeah, so it's been creeping down. Where do you see this game going?
So I have major concerns about Michigan's passing attack. And I have concerns about Ohio State's passing attack too. So I'm not just picking on Michigan here, but hear me out for a second, okay? As I've been watching Michigan these past couple of weeks, I've noticed more of their issues with the tackles like many other people have. Primarily, the right tackle, or whichever tackle got hurt and had to move over, his replacement. But still, even before that injury happened, I was not impressed with the tackles in pass protection. Still very good running, run blocking offensive line. But another thing I noticed, and I've been kind of tracking this a bit on my personal Twitter account, J.J. McCarthy is not doing as well against the blitz now than he previously was. And what I'm noticing by that is that, and I think somebody, college football nerds, I think pointed it out today, and I really wish they wouldn't have, because this is something I thought was an original thought, but I guess somebody else with a larger platform said it first. So
they're good at finding things. That's why we love them so much.
But I think that J.J. McCarthy, like, when the blitz comes, and I don't know if they knew where the blitz was coming from or anything like that with the sign stealing, but I think they knew at least when the blitz was coming. And they were able to kind of like help JJ out with that, get him on the move, get him away from the blitz. But now I see JJ rolling out from these handoffs or these play actions, and it's almost like there's a guy waiting there for him because they're blitzing and the pressure is immediately on him. Whereas before, they did a fantastic job of rolling JJ out into space, and he's kind of roaming out into space, extending the play, sometimes having 4 or 5 seconds to make a throw. I haven't seen that as much against Penn State and against Maryland. So I do have concerns about Michigan's passing game. I also have concerns about Kyle McCord and his passing game. Yes, he did win that game for Ohio State against Notre Dame, but there were also some questionable throws that could have been picked off there. I still think that Kyle McCord, when he's under pressure, he doesn't get through his progressions as well, and his footwork gets a little sloppy. And that's when you see some of the inaccurate throws. I mean, he's still a young quarterback. If you ask me who the better quarterback is, I have no idea. I think they both fit their teams rather well, but I think that both of them have their struggles, at least right now. The thing that I think will be the difference, and it's why I'm picking Ohio State to win, is TreVeyon Henderson. I think that TreVeyon Henderson, not just with his speed to be able to get by the defensive line, but I think that from what I've watched with Ohio State this season, they're going to run a lot of outside stretch runs, kind of sweeps and stuff like that to try to counter this big defensive interior of the defensive line that Michigan has. I think they're going to try and tire them out. I think they're going to try and get them a little bit more winded, and then I think they're going to try to hit it up the gut after that. And if things go well, TreVeyon might have a breakaway run or two in this game. But if not, if they contain TreVeyon Henderson, Michigan will win this game. But I think Ryan Day is a good enough play caller. I've seen a lot of creative stuff from him this season and I think that he's going to let it all loose against Michigan this weekend.
Yeah, and did you say your score for the
I think 24-20.
24-20?
Yeah.
I really agree with a lot, and I feel like I was really on Ryan Day earlier in the season. I feel like he has actually managed this season really, really well.
Yeah.
It's hard because this is coming into the season. This is arguably the best roster that Michigan has had since '97.
Yeah, possibly. Or 06, one of those two.
Yeah, 06 was really, really good too. And they're senior laden. Like, I think JJ is probably the best quarterback. And I know has not been great the past couple weeks, but he has been.
He's been the best Big Ten quarterback this season.
Yeah, and he's the best that Michigan has had. Sorry, the team up north. Gotta keep consistent with the branding here. He's been their best quarterback, maybe since Chad Henne, which isn't saying much, by the way. But
NFL quarterback, had a long career, so
yeah. Henne has had a good long career. Pivotal moment in NFL playoff game a couple years ago too.
Yeah.
But I think the thing about the team up north, I've said all season with them, is that they are the team that I felt like had the least holes out of anybody in the country, including Georgia, including Alabama, and that I felt like Ohio State was the team that has the higher ceiling, but had more questions.
Right.
And I feel like Ohio State's done a good job to address a lot of those questions. I think Josh Simmons in particular has really improved as a tackle. I think they've really figured out some run stuff. I think Henderson is a big part of that. He has reached another gear since he got back from injury. Like, he has been phenomenal. Marv's Marv. Emeka, when healthy, is Emeka. So like I think I saw on a message board that there was a connection to a Minnesota coach, and he said that the playmakers for Ohio State coaching against them worlds different than anybody else they played, including the team up north.
Yeah.
So like the playmakers, we know that they're better. Like, no offense to Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson and
right, those are still good skill players.
Yeah, good players.
Yeah,
they're not Marv and Emeka and Trey and I think Travion at his peak is better than Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, as good as they are.
He has a higher ceiling. It's kind of like with the team,
Yeah, but here's where I really struggle is at times I think Ohio State's linebackers, not Tommy as much, but Steele and Cody can sometimes get lost in the wash in the run game. And so you look at early in games, you saw it against Michigan State. You saw it against Rutgers. You saw it a lot in the second half against Notre Dame. Like, they were able to establish a run. And while I don't think Michigan has been as dominant in the run game this year, I am really concerned about them really filling those gaps well consistently. And at the same time, I really struggle with thinking that the interior of Ohio State's offensive line, Carson Hinsman, I think Donovan Jackson has played better as of late, but I don't think he's played up to the 5-star potential that we all pegged him to have.
He's definitely not Paris Johnson.
No. And I am really concerned about the matchup inside with the interior of Ohio State's offensive line versus those D tackles, who I think are the best in the country. Chris Jenkins, Mason Graham. There's another one that I'm forgetting, but he's
Kenneth Grant.
Yeah, Kenneth Grant. Like, those boys are, they're eaters of worlds in there. And like, I think that you're right. They have to get wide. on them to do any damage. But I'm concerned that the pressure up the middle is gonna really, it's gonna keep Kyle from being able to be accurate. So I think that's one of my big concerns with this game. My other one, Ohio State has a special teams coordinator, and their special teams are awful. And Michigan blocked a punt last week. I really think this game turns on some sort of special teams miscue.
Yeah.
And maybe this is my superstitiousness as a fan coming out, because I think if I analyze this game straight, I'm like, I think Ohio State can win, like, is the better team. I'm picking the team up north, and I've got a similar score, 27-20, the team up north. And I think the game turns on some sort of either special teams play or a pressure where Kyle McCord fumbles because Chris Jenkins or Kenneth Grant, someone gets through, gets home, or someone beats Josh Fryer on the outside. Mm-hmm. Like that to me, I think those splash plays could turn into like a 14-point swing really quickly.
Right. That
closes the door. Now, having said that, so the team up north is my pick. If Ohio State gets up 14-0, I think it's over. Because I think you're right. I don't think the team up north has the ability to go blow for blow. And I think Ohio State's defensive backfield, I think if they force the team up north into obvious passing situations for the rest of the game, like this could go from 14-0 to 35-0 quick, because I think their defense has really turned it up a notch.
Yeah, and I think if you put those pass rushers on those tackles and just let them get after it, obviously it's not going to be like, Michigan State, Ohio State bad, but it would definitely put Michigan at a very big disadvantage.
Yeah, which I think it goes. Like Ohio State's explosion ability is so much higher, but I'm scared to death of middle pressure, them being able to control the clock with the run game and the special teams. So
Ohio State's explosion ability is higher, but Michigan's like consistent move the ball down the field ability is higher. So
yep,
it's all about who excels in that better.
Yep. Well, JR, I appreciate you joining. Any last thoughts before we kind of close up here?
Just sad that Big Ten football is only one weekend left. I love all the rivalries, but I'm sad when they get here because I know that, just means that, we're only going to see some of the teams in bowl games and all those things. So if only we played that darn SEC schedule where it was only like 8 conference games and everybody could be bowl eligible. But, we're just not as privileged as the Southerners, I suppose.
Well, we'll get some more bowl eligible teams though with 18 teams in the conference. So.
Yeah, we should have the most then.
Yeah. Well, before we go, JR, again, where can we find you and where can we find your podcast?
Yep, the Big Ten Huddle. We're going live here in about 5-10 minutes. Talk some basketball if you want to head over there on YouTube. And yeah, so check us out. Twitter, YouTube, podcast, all those things.
Cool. Well, thanks, JR. Appreciate it. We'll make sure we get this. We have more joint episodes in the future. So appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, Zach.
Yep. Bye.
See ya.